right, so I'm very happy to do this live stream with you together. And tell me a little bit about what got you curious about saddle fitting.
What got me curious about saddle fitting is that, I'm working with the horse feet, and it's pretty much often is the cause of lameness. But this is not the only reason why the horse could be lame. And there are different factors what could contribute into it: the riding, the hoof care, and the saddle fitting as well. And I would be and also it affects the rider, but I primarily interested especially to know about horses, because sometimes it's very often overlooked that the saddle can cause some kind of injury or something like that.
I know you're a certified barefoot trimmer. Have you ever worked with shoes like metal or other materials?
No, with a kind of glue on shoes, not the metal, yes.
Okay. I always refer 3 parts to the horse where there's normally metal: in the mouth, on the neck, and on the feet. But nonetheless, if the foot is unbalanced, you know yourself, it's very hard to keep the horse sound, even though the horse is very good to adapt. But when we have unbalanced rider or unbalanced saddle fit, you will see it how the feet will wear. Is that correct?
Yes, of course, absolutely.
Right. And as a matter of fact, when I came to North America, I did my journeyman saddlery in Germany, and then I worked for a while as a journeyman after I finished my apprentice, and then I did my master's, and then I worked in England, and then I went to Canada. And in Canada was actually farrier, 6th generation, who told me how he can see how bad saddle fat can affect the feet. And he did both, barefoot as well as shoes. And he actually wrote a book. I wonder if you know him, Tony Gonzalez. You ever heard about him?
I haven't read it, but I heard this name.
Yeah. So he wrote a book called Proper Movement and Balance. And he was also the first person who says, yes, there's a rider's scala where we need to move up in the training, and number 5 is straightness. But sometimes the horse has skeletal deformity or change, what through training or proper saddle fitting or trimming we can't change. And that really got me curious, because I was growing up as a trainer, as a rider, and riding the horse even is very important. And my competition horse, I dragged my farrier everywhere along because he really knew how the feet needed to be done. Now, with saddle fit, how that relates, it was through Tony Gonzalez. So I got a slideshow here, which I like to share with you. And this is actually out of his book here. The cross-section of a horse, looking at the front without the neck. And he was pointing out in his book how the upper arm on the front legs could look like this, and on this side it could be deformed. And then I thought, well, he's 6th generation, so obviously he learned from his dad and his dad from his dad. And I thought, maybe it's just not true.
Some old things.
Maybe it's not true, right? So I didn't really want to believe it. And then when I started to surround myself with other professionals, from osteopaths, veterinarian, more farriers such as yourself, it came up once in a while. And I was teaching saddle fitting around the globe for a while. I'm doing this now since close to 50 years. My last 20 years, I literally flew from continent to continent until COVID, because now we do it online training. And people say, how can you do saddle fit online? Just pretty much, if you look at the whole horse approach. Many people heard the saying, no hoof, no horse. And many people understand how, myself, I already told you the story, how important my farrier was to me. But sometimes we blame the farrier when the horse is not sound. And of course, I was always on, make sure everything is right. My big competition is coming up.
Pretty much blaming actually the hoof gear, because actually I created even some kind of picture what I'm using as a sticker during my conversation, that the common people who are riders, I mean, they could be even experienced riders, generally somehow they are missing this horse in between the mouth and the feet.
Yes, that's right. And we have in North America a sport where people ride very, very early, the young horses. And if you look at the maturity timeline of a horse, they're training the Western horses at 15 years, at 2 years they're at the competition. Same with racing horses around the world. You know, they have horses that start very early, and they develop just here to this green line. All this is still in developmental stage. In Germany, we have a saying for horses between 3 and 6. We call them Remonte, and that comes from the cavalry time. How we ride horses in that stage differently. But like everything else, it's very driven by money these days. And we see dressage horses starting very early. Now, what happens to these horses when they're finished? So if it comes from the Western world or from the racing world, they often get sold to the amateur rider. Now, if they survived their 2 years on the racetrack, or sometimes 5 years on the racetrack, or they've survived the riders, the English riding, we see a lot in the Western riders, very heavy riders in Western, in the sport as well as. So how does that affect the feet? So part of what I really enjoyed working with other professionals together was working with people who do dissections, such as veterinarians. And they says, well, there is a second time I heard somebody say, you know, this is not a bad picture the farrier started off. And it's actually true. So I got a connection to Sao Paulo, and this professor showed me that they tried to fix this on a horse. Now, super difficult surgery with lots of infection. Finally, the horse healed, but they had to euthanize it because all the other joints compensated, right? We're trying sometimes to go against nature. It doesn't work. But we have veterinarians who dissect horse and say sometimes the first and second rib is calcified together. Here you see 2 ribs became 1 rib, and this is just the first rib.
Incredible.
Sometimes in the lumbar region, for our listeners who are not so familiar with the skeletal drawing, that would be in this region here. Okay, this is a very sensitive spot because we in saddle making, we want to concentrate to keep the saddle on top of the rib cage on a big long muscle. And people say, well, who's right? Who's wrong? I like to go a little bit with science, and I like to go a little bit with history, what people had done with horses. And it shows in museums that the first stage people were sitting on horses were on top of the croup. And the reason people were sitting there, because the horse was not that tall back then. So that was the only way that the people could get the feet off the ground and be carried by a horse. And then you've seen a lot of drawings and pictures in history where people sitting in the middle of the horse's back. So it wasn't until Caprilia, cavalry officer from Italy, came up with a 2-point seat. So now every bareback rider, bullfighter, rodeo rider, every rider sits at the base at the withers. Okay, so what we learned? We started here to ride, then we started to sit in the middle, and now we sit more forward. We never sit here.
Yeah, it looks quite fragile, that part.
That's right. And when the veterinarian gives me this bone, he says, look at the thickness of a pen, okay? And look at the first lumbars versus processing. Look how thin they are, okay? So they're, like you mentioned already, they're very fragile. So here is where everything falls apart when we don't identify the fragile area on the horse. However, sometimes the bones are not as similar, as even as I just showed, right? Sometimes, right, they're not left and right the same size.
Yeah.
Sometimes they have this transitional vertebrae. Now that is a big problem. Why? Because when the nerve comes out of the spine, the nerves normally run underneath. Now, if the horse has a transitional vertebrae, right, the nerve runs on top. So they can't even stand a saddle pad touching it. That's how irritated those horses get. Very hard to detect, but very uncommon. Now, why am I telling you all this? And what has that to do with shoeing or lameness from the saddle? As I said, I absolutely love saddle fitting because we can now base it back to history when we understood how can we get a saddle to fit not just only the horse, but also the rider. And you were mentioning to me, I wanted to know how the saddle can make a horse lame when the saddle doesn't fit to the horse and when it doesn't fit to the rider. Now, I judged a lot, I taught a lot, and my siblings, my sister and my brothers, we were all riding. And you know what? My sister was the best rider, and we were all jealous because she got the best horses. But then she stopped riding because she had a lot of discomfort in the saddle and pain in the saddle. She went back and forth to try all kinds of saddles, bareback riding, treeless saddles, you name it, but eventually gave up. Now, back then we were little kids and we were all happy because we got the good horses now. So it wasn't until this doctor, Dr. James Warson, wrote a book about long-term damage to riders. And if a person doesn't ride correctly, the question is, what is correctly? I'm going to come back to this in a second. The horse will be in pain. And when the horse compensates, he compensates in the movement what could look lame. So all these years when I thought, how can I make a good saddle what fits horses? I get to hear a doctor who says, if a saddle doesn't fit the rider, it will never fit the horse. And I says, what? I can ride in anything. But they show it with a sensor pad on the seat and the sensor pad underneath the saddle, what goes then to the weight. It has been shown with data, not with opinions, that when a rider compensates, he or she sits heavier in the saddle. Kind of makes sense. You know, so I was listening and I wanted to hear about it, and I wanted to know how come that the most common long-term damages to women are chronic bladder and kidney infection with a knee problem and L4, L5. I was just, why L4, L5? Well, he says the first thing we need to get in our brain, the guys are not as curvature as a lady's curvature is due to the pelvis axis of the horse. And I says, pelvis what? Well, where the balance point is of the pelvis of a female. Okay, what has that to do with saddles and what has that to do with riding? So, well, when you're standing, you put your weight on your feet, right? Right. When you're sitting, do you want to sit on the horse like you sit on the toilet or at the dinner table? No, you don't want to sit in the chair seat, right? You want to sit in we call that the standing seat, which means if one of the two sexes has a more forward pointed pelvis and a shorter tailbone, due to the fact that they have a birth channel, the other person doesn't, we balance ourselves on the seat. And if I compensate for it, we not only see it in data, but we see it in the performance of the horse. Now, how can we do that? Well, we all seen people wearing the Apple Watch or Fitbit, what counts the steps, right? And your heart rate and all that stuff. And in horses, there's gait analysis, heart monitors, pure data. And this made it so much easier for me to talk about this because now it's not just my experience over the last almost 50 years or over the horses. We have data and measurements over 260,000 horses, but it's also, as I said, listen to a doctor, a gynecologist, a veterinarian, osteopath, farrier, because yes, I wrote Yes, I make saddles. Yes, I have a good feel in the seat, but I didn't study human anatomy or horse anatomy or the hoof. I mean, when I met Pete Ramey, I was blown away when I read his book. You know, he's a big person, and he introduced me to all the studies in Sweden, and my mind was just. And then I noticed, you know, the horse will never be happy if you have the whole horse approach. You understand how important the hoof is. So one of our courses we teach is how to recognize a good hoof. And when you are a salesman, saddle fitter, saddle manufacturer, whoever takes the course from us, you know, you can sell the saddle and you can make it look fun and make it look all okay. But if the customer is not going to turn into raving fans and the customer is not happy with the saddle, they will not recommend you. And sometimes your saddle will not fix the feet. You need a good farrier on your hand.
Yes, it's kind of combo, yes.
Right? So that really was a big, big life opener. So you see a lot of riders sitting like this on a horse, okay, with saddles or without saddles. And if we would walk like that, people would say, oh, that's bad posture. All right. So bareback pads, if I pivot back my pelvis, that's bad to the horse. And
I actually recognize where I am, but I hope I'm not on these pictures.
So what he was showing us, first I read this book, and then he saw my saddle fitting clinics, and he showed me this picture. He says there is a pelvis. What has this? The blue stuff here, that's the disc in between, right? When a human stands on the horse, this red dotted line is horizontal. Like it should be like this green line. This pelvis has a gift, if it's still alive, to bear a child. In other words, this is a female pelvis. And we want to stay on our seat bones, but when this part here hits the bone of the withers first, or this part where the underwear is, subconsciously you will pivot back from that because that hurts. Now, what is my possibility to ride? If I ride like this, it's inevitable that this will happen. And this is why this is a common problem when the healthy disc turns into a slip disc. I mean, if you have a collapsed disc, you can't walk anymore. So we see a lot of riders with saddles, without saddles, who ride in a saddle what is made by a product which was and still is heavy duty, dominated by males. We might have female CEOs. We might have 1 in 1,000 a female saddler. Let me put some perspective to this, what that means. When you have a saddle maker, and you see how a saddle maker works, they put the saddle together. It's art and it's science, as I said before. So you put the saddle together, and each stage, you start off with the frame, okay, and the frame has metal reinforcement, and on this frame we build a seat. First we put webbing on, then we put foam on, and each stage the saddler sits on it and feels, is there any sharp edges? Can I pivot back and forth without discomfort? No, I carry on. So if a guy sits on that saddle while he makes it, okay, what we're looking for is the feel of the horse's spine. When I look at a horse's back, okay, so we've seen this before and you've seen this 1,000 times, but there are these long bones, the spinal processes, and then you can, the light shines a little shitty on here. There is big muscles you're sitting on. This is why bareback riding is so good, right? So soft and comfortable. So, but the reality is you will have the carpet pencil effect. And people say, what's the carpet pencil effect? Well, if you put a pen or a pencil underneath the carpet, you won't see it, but you can always feel it and find it. Because wherever the high is, you find that, right? So when the skin on the horse is over the back, this is soft. And when the seat bone goes on the horse, okay, when the seat bone goes on the horse, here we go, they're not sitting on the middle part, they're sitting on the soft part. And you see how that bone does not compress? It doesn't compress. We can feel it on every horse, even on the most chunkiest pony you ever seen. You can find the top bone. So when I learned saddle making, my dad always taught us the person who knows the how will follow the person who knows the why. He taught us kids, ask a lot of questions. And if it's logic, you understand, then it's easier to make something, follow it, or go with it. So obviously me, little boy here in the Saddlery company, why do we need to make this rise in the saddle? And then my master said, you're so stupid. I thought you're rider, you should know. So what I'm talking about is the first step in, there's different types of trees. Okay, so let's walk first with that. We put a webbing, the width of a car seat belt.
Mm-hmm.
So one here, and then we run in together, and then it's like a hammock. But in the front and across to the back, we put the webbing across. All right, so we build a hammock, but the front is a peak, like my hand, my hand. So we're trying to simulate this peak, and then on left and right we put seat foam on it. So when you get your seat foam in, nice and soft. On the carbon fiber tree or plastic tree, you see here where the dotted line is.
Very interesting.
Right, so this is done purposely to create a rooftop. The rooftop is important for a guy because if we fall on our male parts, we faint. So when we sit bareback on the horse or on the saddle with the rooftop, automatic, without me even thinking, it goes to the left or to the right.
This is quite interesting, how to say, news. Like I would never think about it, you know. All right. And
I would never knew when I would ask my saddle maker, says, why we make it not just like a chair, nice, smooth, even across?
Yes.
Says, no, you need to create the divider. Oh, the divider. And then it makes sense, of course. But it didn't click for me because my sister and no woman likes to sit on something pokey in the crotch.
Not really, yeah.
So you don't have the leisure to put your female parts left or right. Even with special underwear, you know, you don't avoid that pain. So you're leaning back. You lift the front of that rise.
Yes.
In 1996, after I talked to his doctor, and he says, you got to take butt cast of the rider. I says, what? What? Take a cast of the rider. How am I doing this? So he contacted me with somebody who does casts for the teeth. He was a rider. He gave me a couple ideas. And we made over 120 butt casts. To this day, we still have all these casts. And you can see, doctor or not doctor, you can see two shapes. One is like this, a V, up and down, like this guy, like a V. So this bone is a very thin bone. These calls the pubic branches, pubic symphysis, seat bones. So we don't want to sit on the pubic symphysis or on the branch. We want to sit on our seat bones. So we have longer tailbone. Our back is not curved, and our butt sits closer to the horse. The first time I saw a drawing from a human skeleton and with drawn on muscles was from a veterinarian. And I called her and I says, why do you talk about saddle fit to the rider? Why do you show this? Well, if it doesn't fit the rider, the horse will go lame. What? Now I was like, really, how can that go to the lameness? Well, I'm going to get to this. So when we look from the bottom, so I turn it this way and look at the front and the back, the hole here where your legs are, it calls the hip socket. Okay, so this is where your legs hang in. So when you're standing, hip socket. It's dead in the center from the pelvis. So when a male sits on the saddle or first time on a horse and his wife or girlfriend comes with it, She is the horse lover. He just loves his wife and does whatever she says. Okay. Everybody's saying to him, oh, you have a good seat.
Yes.
Why? Two main reasons. Number one, most likely he sits on the saddle, what is made by a man for the man with the peak in the front. Bareback or not, he will not hurt himself, and he sits there. And because his hip socket is in the center, okay, he can easily balance on his seat bones. It's a piece of cake for him.
May I just shortly break you and tell you, for me, as for the rider who always taking riding lessons and things, was always very strange. The instruction I was always given, like I should rotate my pelvis under, but at the same time bring my legs back.
Mm-hmm.
And I felt like some kind of broken shrimp. And actually now I understand. So basically I just could not sit on that saddle.
Yes. And here's a picture what I was just explained. Here's the pelvis of a male. Okay. There's the hip socket. And you see that red line in the center. Look at the ladies.
Yes.
Okay. This is not me, saddle maker, come up with some stories. This is what I learned flying around the world. And to every gynecologist, every doctor, I ask, is this true? Or is this doctor just a wacko? No, you can look it up in any anatomy book. This is how the two sexes are differ. When we bury people and we dig them up again after there's only skeleton left, the only way you can tell is on the pelvis. Interesting. So this is where you're sitting on your seat bones. You can see definitely the guy who has narrow seat bones will have a saddle in the back here, which is narrow. If you sit on a narrow saddle, your seat bones will not hit where you want to sit. Most women or riders who don't fit properly in the saddle say sometimes to me, I don't have seat bones. Every human has seat bones. But why is
I've been at that stage as well. Like I was like.
So I'm not talking to somebody who has no clue, right? So you understand.
Yeah, I was there.
So I thought, wow, interesting. All right. So then he showed me, remember the veterinarian who I was telling you about? She said to me, because the guy has less curvature in the lower back, the ladies have more curvature. Ladies' butt muscles, it's a little bit higher here, where the guy's butt muscle is here. Look at the space between his butt cheek on the spine, and look at this. So how can I teach you, when this is your natural alignment, to get the right seat, if your body is different by nature, but you're sitting on something what is made for this? It's kind of like you asking me to ride on a horse with female underwear where there's no material for my parts to ride comfortable. It's impossible, right? No guy would ever sit on a horse in female underwear. So this is just material. I'm talking about steel reinforced, sometimes plastic tree or carbon fiber trees. This is getting worse. So first of all, why do I need to sit shoulder, hips, and heels? Well, we have 4 curves in our spine, and they act of shock absorption when we run, jump, or walk. This is what's in our body, woman or man. Lower back. Yeah, so that's your typical S-curve. So when you sit with your shock absorption on the horse, you sit softer to the horse. Then you see the knees are bent on most riders. Now, if you're a jockey, your stirrup leather would be really, really short, but the ball of the foot would always be underneath your sternum. Because when you're a baby, you're walking on your tippy toes. When you go in the crouch and lift up your heels, you can balance. Very hard to try this on your heel. So when we human jump down the stairs or a big jump, we jump down, we always jump and feather in our ankles, knees, and hip. If we don't do it, our back explodes. Right? Can you imagine you jump from a little step like that with your knees straight? nobody would do it. Right? You kill your back. So flexibility has to be absolutely through here and here with your foot back. So now back to what you said. Why can I not do it when I sit back? Well, first of all, if your contact is down here and you lean back, this will happen to your pelvis. We don't have this little shelf. This little bone here, let me see if I find the right light to hit it, comes out. Okay. I call this a little shelf, and your ligament goes through here. I'm going to show you this in a minute. And again, I'm a saddle maker. I had to learn all this from a doctor. Okay. You can see where the outcome of the leg is here. So if you don't have a saddle here because of your skeletal design by nature, and the saddle is here, you go back. Now that bone goes forward.
Yes, this is exactly what I felt like. And at the same time, the instruction, and bring your legs back. And like, I cannot bring it back in my hips because they are already inclined forward.
Absolutely. So now here comes the worst part. And I did it to my students, and I thought my sister didn't try hard enough. I go grab the muscles and rotate it out and put that leg back. And all what I did is make her cry. And many people have that done. And the hips are in major, major agony. They're cramping up.
It's like super uncomfortable. You know, I also
It's ridiculous.
I have been through this, like when it was manually put back. And generally it was also followed by the instruction, now relax. So the thing is that it's just super uncomfortable, really. And I was trying to do some gymnastic for hips, something. I know.
So here's what's happening. Without you realizing, I don't care if you weigh 50 kilos, 100 kilos, 150 kilos. If you do not use your shock absorption in your spine, hips, knees, and ankle, and have your shoulder, hips, and heels aligned, you will put excess pressure in the back of the saddle. That will not allow the horse to use the back properly. This is all documented, and I show you why. So we have in our body nerves, like horse has, and when I don't address this little guy, the sciatic nerve, what runs from your spine inside your leg down, okay, then I will do more than just hip pain. I will do long-term damage to your lower back. How? So let me show you, and this is all fascinating for me because as a saddle maker, nobody said to me, look at the difference between the muscles on the ladies versus the guys. But before you go to the muscles, look at this part. We call it the neck of the femur. What gives you the hips, the waist, the hips, the knees, right? That's your waist, that's your hip. What gives you the hip, the length of your hip is that neck. Our neck of that bone is very short. And then your knee goes in and down. We call that Q-shaped. Men's goes barely in and goes strong. And I don't care how thick are my thighs or skinny, it's always oval. So I got a very clear, on most guys, visible little curve in the back of my leg when I sit on the horse. Because for our parts, when we walk, we need space here in that gap. Ladies' parts are in size and they're very close here. So if I compare a female rider to a male rider, right, and I say, okay, I make the tree all the same for male and female, we got more space here. And in this space here, what fits on the saddle is super important. Because if I don't attack it, I show you two trees. Okay? If I don't make it fit, you can have a great saddle in the crotch and on your seat bone, but the bar here, okay, we need that to feel on our leg as the guy. If I make a saddle like this, which always has been done for thousands of years, and I still close my eyes, my eyes and my ears, and not listen and not looking that the majority of the riders are female, then you never have a chance to bring your toes forward, your knees on the horse, and your leg down. Because this forces the longest bone in your body, what has one joint on your hip, one joint on the knee, you can't bend it here. It's impossible. Okay, and you're not strong enough to make that steel reinforced edge narrow. So look at the difference in these two bars. That's for ladies, that's for men. Because of what I just explained. That is what is the difference between the gender. But I'm very skinny girl. I'm very heavy girl. Your thigh will be always round. That's your genetics. The muscular structure, it's different here than there. So that is what very often creates quite a bit of an agony above what I said earlier. So when I know all this as a saddle maker, but I don't make a saddle to the rider, of course they will have pain. So when I address that to you, it's kind of like this. So here you see this person sitting in the cast. Okay. Once you have the right bar here and the wide enough seat bone here, okay, then your seat bones will be on the seat foam like this one. You're looking at the pelvis. Here's the hip socket. Seat bones. Most riders like right this. Is it like this? The reasons why there is a lot of chronic bladder and kidney affection, because women for years weren't allowed to ride with your legs apart.
Absolutely, this is where I sit. And recently I had some new physiotherapist masseur appointment, and he actually said that my sitting nerve, not sure, but I think it's called like this, that it's slightly inflamed. I guess that could be probably the connection between that.
So this is the Spanish riding school here, 400 years old, and the riders go for a year on the launch line to get a pliable seat. So what is a pliable seat? A pliable seat is when you stand straight, put your hand and back and forth. You got to be sucking in your stomach. See, nothing changes here. I'm just sucking in my stomach. So what I'm doing here is I'm tilting my pelvis. Okay, so I'm sucking my stomach and I put out my beer belly. So now I have a really hollow back. That motion here got to be in riding. So what I need to be able to do this in riding. This is what they teach since 400 years. But first, you got to get your leg underneath and put your seat bones on. Well, I just explained to you, if your seat bones are not on the saddle, and now you're falling back because the saddle is not made for the female pelvis, now your leg up forward. Now you put your leg forward, now your hip pops
just
out.
Like this.
Ridiculous, right? So the reason why the second most common damage is the hip and knee pain is because you can force your toe in. But if I do weightlifting or any kind of a squat and my toe is this way, but my knee goes out and not over the foot, I blow the meniscus.
Yes.
My knee will go bye-bye. So we don't do this in humans where we bend down, not over the foot. Maybe by mistake that I twist my foot or my knee. Well, the pain is severe. So in riding, it's just a little bit because you do just a little rising trot. And this rising trot with your foot here and your knee not over the foot, like that, okay, that puts your knee in. Now, these things, I would never even thought about it as a saddle maker, trainer, or judge, because I was taught by a man, by a man, by a man. I don't feel what women feel when I make a saddle. 99% of women don't feel, are not saddle makers. They're riders. So in the late 70s, people say, well, last time we made a special saddle was in the 1600s when we made side saddles for women. It's about time that we think about this now, because more and more doctors and veterinarians say, the horse will be lame if the rider doesn't sit right and soft. You have seen this before. We all have seen this before when a bad rider sits on the horse, bounce, 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 and you go, oh, that poor horse. A good rider can hide that bouncing by going like this, or be crampy in the back. So which means your shock absorbers are not really absorbing the shock. And by measuring the impact you do in the seat with sensors, we can see that a man that weighs 100 kilo can ride half his weight because he's soft and goes with the weight. You follow the motion. You do your pelvis tilting. But if you stop that tilt because you're protecting your parts and your joints, where's all the force going in? So all of a sudden, you look at them and says, wow, look at the heavy guy, but what a soft rider. Oh, look at the beautiful, slim girl. She's made for riding, but boy, is she a hard rider. You don't know what it is, but you see it. You see the energy is not in one. It's against each other. So this guy tries to force that leg back. It's impossible. You have to literally break your pelvis and your joint here unless there is an answer. Here it is. We patented in 1996 and sold the patent to the bicycle seats with a hole. A woman's saddle has a hole in the front. You don't see it, but there is barely any foam. And when you sit in it, the first impact, what comes on the horse when you're sitting correctly, it's actually this part, then your private part, then this. And if there's a withers, you lean back. And if you lean back, pelvis, the disc goes. So how can I get you to get the standing seat? Well, first of all, I got to remove that point in the front, which we purposely put in for the male. So people say to me, well, why do the bicycle riders who are males like your design as well? Because a bicycle rider doesn't ride like this. They ride like this.
Yes.
Right? So now I feel for the first time when I don't have the right seat, what a woman feels in the riding saddle. And it's super uncomfortable. Right? So that cause all kinds of problems for the guys. So we won't go there. But my point, what I'm saying is, if you now sit in the saddle where you don't have that man-made peak, you have actually a void there. So now you have a choice to go back and forth. You get the support in your seat width because your seat bones are wider. And you don't have something what is ultra wide here, what forces literally your hip to pop out. So if I have a saddle, how do I know it's a female or male saddle? The number one rule I always say to every woman or person who's listening, first try this exercise. You stand up, put yourself in the Tai Chi stand, slightly bent legs, feet shoulder width apart. Rather than holding the reins, you can go like this or like this. That doesn't matter. So now do the exercise. Can you do this exercise while you're in this position? 99.9% can do it. Okay. Try to simulate this exercise on the saddle. It's on the saddle stand, on a hay bale, on the edge of the fence. I don't care where you put the saddle. Don't put it on the horse yet. Okay, where your feet come out. If you can do this in the seat and do not feel the seam in the middle, I recommend people put jeans on, not riding jeans, just normal street jeans, because they got that nasty seam in the crotch, right? So if you can do this on the saddle and you pivot back and forth in jeans, you know on the horse, you will be able to do it too. Second test, when you sit on the saddle, move your hip. Okay, can you move your hip back and forth without cramping? Not on the horse. And that's where 8 out of 10 saddles fail. If you can't even do it on a skinny saddle stand, how do you expect to do it on the big horse? If you are an amazing ballroom dancer, and I'm coming with very shitty shoes to your lesson, you wouldn't even talk to me. You would send me out and get shoes that fit me. Yet, we see many, many people have never heard about that there is actually 9 differences which are completely opposite. Number 1 is the crotch area where I put that ball there, right? Mm-hmm. So right here, you can buy a saddle with a peak or without it. Number 2, that is where the deepest impact is in the saddle. On the women, it's more forward than the male, due to the fact you have a little bit more curvature here. Again, I'm not making this up. As a matter of fact, I really don't like that the women are so much different, because as a saddle maker, I got now a male saddle and a female saddle. That's more inventory. But then if you really look closely, why would I make even male saddles in an industry which is 99.9% women? Yes, there's some riders. But why would I, when I stock 20 saddles, I would maybe stock 5 male saddles? The rest I would have for women. I would focus, same like in the apparel. Go in the tack shop and find clothes for a guy. Good luck. See, the clothing industry figured this out.
Yeah, makes sense, by the way. Very interesting. You're right.
But saddle makers haven't figured this out yet. I think because, as I said, we are guys, 90% who make saddles. We sit in the saddle, it feels great. When I married my wife, I made her say, hey, my new saddle, you like it? She constantly said no. I called my brother, says, I think I married the wrong woman. She doesn't like anything I do. So once I found out from a gynecologist all what I'm sharing with you, I finally understood, well, the horse will be lame when the rider doesn't be able to do the pelvis tilt and get the feet underneath what they try to teach since 400 years in the Spanish riding. If we don't have the fundamental, you will soar the horse. Okay, so now I got to go to the horse part, because we talked mainly about the riders, but people say, oh, come on, I can ride in any saddle. I have professors, I have Olympic riders, I have all kinds of women who talk this. Of course you can. Of course you can, but you compensate. And I can prove it by the impact factor you put in the saddle and where you put it in the saddle. And that's for me when everything came together and it connected. So let's have a look at the impact factor and what I just said. So we talked about the maturity timeline here, or of the horse, how the horse forms up and so on and so forth. But sometimes when the saddle is uncomfortable, without the rider knowing, they shift themselves a little bit around the saddle to compensate. Now I'm sitting heavy duty on the right. And now I influence how much weight I put on one foot. You will see it. You will see I have different heels. Well, high heel and low heel syndrome, it's a whole new top game.
I absolutely, let's say, used to do it. Maybe I'm still doing it.
Mm-hmm.
Super familiar. Like, it feels like I even went to check if my legs are the same long, because it felt like, I don't remember, I think right stirrup felt like my leg is longer.
Yeah. So why is that so important that you sit in the center quiet? Because that will have an impact on the spine. So when we go back to this picture quick, this picture shows us that this entire rib cage hangs on the front leg with what we call thoracic sling. The back hangs together with only tendons. Tendons connect the pelvis to the spine. And once you have a tendon injury on your body, you know how long it takes to heal. If you have a muscle injury, it heals faster because it has more circulation. So when you sit crooked on the horse, it's kind of like you have one shoe with a little heel and the other shoe is this big. We never do that when we humans, because he says, that's going to bust my back. So if you do this for, let's say you ride every day for 30 minutes, 5 times a week, you stop walking in 5 minutes because your back goes into spasm. The muscle tries to protect. So what's the horse do? Let's have a look what the horse does. So we can actually take a saddle off, take a tomography camera, and we always see the horse will instantly bridge. So you're looking at the neck, the spine, and the red spot, you see the human's hands there. You can see the hands out there. But the red spot is where the saddle made the most contact. The back will go tight. When the back goes tight, all the spinal processes, this is a human spine, see how there's apart, but horses have the same, right? They go just different directions, which I show you in a minute. They touch, and we know this is kissing spine. So the horse guards himself, that hurts, but always starts to go in the lumbar. That's where the most problem starts, because the muscles tighten now. Now the SI is off, and now we see uneven steps. Oh, the farrier didn't do a good job. No, you sit and crooked on the horse. The horse tries to compensate how you sit on it. But the absolutely worst thing you can do to the horse is do what they do since 35 million years. Horses dominate each other or fight for the herd when the stallion bites the horse in the neck. Bears, dogs, wolves, cats, when you pick them up by the scruff, you've seen that before in some documentary, how the wolf carries the pup to the other den. If you pick up a little kitty cat on the neck, what does a kitty cat do? It freezes. So what does the horse do when he mounts the mare and breeds her? He bites her in the neck, so the back is hollow. I never understood it until an osteopath explained that to me. The back is hollow. Okay, when the back is hollow, the hind leg is out, the pelvis opens, and the front leg gets really loaded. See how low the fetlock is? Now,
very interesting, yes.
And I was wondering, why is that effect? Then he said to me, have you ever hit your funny bone? Oh, yeah, 1,000,000 times. See, it's not a bone, it's a nerve. It calls the ULNA, ulnar nerve. So if you hit it, you feel it in your pinky. So horses have a nerve on the neck, what's called the CN11, called the cranial nerve 11. When the stallion hits that nerve, okay, that's here in the neck, goes right there, from the brain, and then inserts into the trapezius. You can see here, when the horse has these lines on the shoulder, let me make that bigger, that page, so we can see it better. So when he has that line here, only two reasons. The horse is constantly in an area where there's lots of bugs, lots of flies, and he shakes it off, or he gets bitten by the saddle or a driving surcingle or a harness or a blanket surcingle in the withers, like a stallion does. That signals to drop the neck. And when they drop the neck, see these arrows here? When they drop the neck, this massive nerve spider, let's call it, will be pinched by their own rib cage. And that travels down. I can adjust the saddle and your horse is lame. All I have to do is make sure the saddle pinches here. So the easiest way to check, is my saddle hitting a nerve, like my funny bone is a nerve, what makes the horse react like they react in nature when the stallion bites the back. So how can I check that? It is an easy check. So if I don't want the saddle to do this, I need to see if my saddle fits. If I don't do that, we've seen this in many pictures. Unfit and horse in pain is when the rib cage sinks down. Why? I just explained that. When you see necks like this, the horse is in massive holding and compensation. You could be the world's best farrier. The horse compensates not because of the hoof, of course, when it's shitty hoof, but the horse will look like lame because he gets pinched nerves. So the oldest soldier trick was the pencil or a pen. Okay, you take that pen and you go to the end of the mane, right? To end of the mane. The end of the mane. Let me go inside the horse first. Here's the trapezius. Our trapezius is here, and it helps us to lift the shoulder. So when the stallion bites anywhere in this trapezius, in front of the withers, on the withers, or behind it, the trapezius goes all the way where that red triangle is. End of the mane, 10 centimeter down to the base of the withers. That's where these nerves are. Okay, so Star Trek Enterprise, you saw Dr. Spock does the Vulcan grip. People faint. So that's a very vulnerable area. So if the saddle pinches there, all you need is a pencil. So you take your saddle, put it loose on the horse. Where? On the neck, in the middle, on the croup. Where's the right spot? The right spot is that D-ring. Every saddle maker puts that D-ring in front of this metal thing. Okay, so we want that metal thing behind the horse's shoulder blade. Okay, the shoulder blade is this thing right there. And that is 90% in line with the end of the mane. So if we have the saddle in the right spot, the D-ring lines up with the mane. I put the saddle on, no rider, no girth, no saddle pad, just loose on the horse in the right spot, I just explained. Then you take a pencil and you put it on the end of the mane. And then you do the windshield wiper test. It has to go where the D-ring is, easy through this area when it's loose on top. This is a narrow white tree. People say, wait, did you just say narrow white? That's an oxymoron. That is me telling you there's an intersection, go left and right at the same time. No, not really, because this is the tree width and that's the tree angle. On all army saddles, on all Western saddles, on all packing saddles or mule saddles, we talk about the bar width. This is the width. And that's the angle. Okay? That's super important to understand. So if I don't want to bite where the stallion bites and make the horse intermittently, I got to have the right width and the right angle. Very easy to check on the horse if it fits. This one is a narrow tree width with a wide angle. See, I can't even get my fist in there. Very tight. In this one, I have more space.
Yeah, so the same angle, but it can be more wide or it can be wide bar more narrow.
Right. You got it. Absolutely. Right? So there's companies where you can take this out and that here, that spacer makes this go in or out. Then there's companies where you can have different angles, right? These interchangeable gull plates, but you never change this.
Yes, it's just the angle.
So then there's companies that can change. If you have 4 or 5 horses, you have to have one saddle for 5 saddles. First, fit the metal plate. There's a screw in the middle, so you can make it wider there. And then on the side, there's another screw. The way that works is like a car in a standard car. You hit the clutch, you shift the gear. The screw lets that open. You put it to the size you want, and then the screw holds it again. So the industry has provided saddles, what works for female pelvises and what works for horses. So the rider doesn't make the horse lame, and the saddle doesn't make the saddle lame. Sorry, the saddle fit to the horse doesn't make the saddle fit. But the people don't know it exists. And a very expensive saddle could be a saddle that costs $1,000 and makes my horse always lame. That's expensive. I have all these farriers constantly chewing, constantly nutrition problem, constantly colic issues, blah, blah. That's expensive. But I can also have an $8,000 saddle, which is expensive and does all the damage. The horse doesn't care what name the saddle has, what color the saddle has. They just want to know, hey, do you pinch me or not? Do you have 5 more minutes? Because we were kind of over our time a little bit.
Yes, absolutely fine. Yes. It's just that something moving around me.
It's okay. So if my pencil goes through there, then I put the girth on the saddle pad and the rider. Because just like when I sit on the couch, my cushion on the couch compress. So when you put a saddle on the horse's back, the muscle compress a little bit, maybe not as much as the couch cushion puller, but you know what I'm saying, right? So the saddle will come down. If it's already tight and your pencil don't go through, you're doing the stallion's effect. Okay, I give you an analogy. When I buy a helmet, it has to fit from here to here. That's the length of my head. That would be also related to the saddle lengths we haven't talked about today. Okay, but let's skip that for a minute. Let's talk about the helmet width. If it's too wide, boom, I can't see. If it's too narrow, it sits above my head and I go like this, the helmet flies off. It has to have the right width. Now the side. If the sides stay up, I ride and this thing slides around and my helmet sits like this. Very annoying. If it's too tight on the bottom, I get a massive headache because I get a lot of pressure on my temples. So the side has to be correct. Are you able to make a sound with your hands like this, Anna?
Yes.
Show me.
Like this?
Yeah, perfect. Now, are you able to put that pinky on your index finger like this? Make an X.
Pinky, like
this. Like this. Okay, now hit it 3 times. 1, 2, 3. Okay, so that's obviously uncomfortable. So what I need to check on my saddle, if this is the shoulder blade, this is the tree, does the shoulder blade slide through this way or does it get clipped? We call it.
Okay, I understood the point. All right.
So now the horse stumbles. Oh, the farrier didn't cut the toe right. The horse causes always stumbling. So I blame you rather than to say, hey, is the angle of the tree correct? Again, you use your pen. Very easy. Okay. So when I look at the saddle, we already talked about the tree width, how to see the stallion's bite. Now we want to see if the saddle fits and the horse is not tripping. Every saddle you can do it. You move this a little bit and you will see there is a area where it doesn't move. This is where the metal ends. So then I put my pen in here or I use chalk. Okay. So just so my eye can look at that. Now I go to the horse. I go to the horse, this widest part of the shoulder. That would be, here's the end of the shoulder. That's where you line up the D-ring. The widest part would be here. Okay. So I lay the pen on here and here. So let's say this my head is the end of the mane is here, there. So I put my pen there. But if I want to measure my side of my head, I need to flip the pen. So now I do the same on the horse. Why? Because that shoulder blade doesn't start where the mane is. Okay, it's 1 pen length down. So what I do when I do that on the horse, at the mane, I flip it and I have it exactly where the spine of the shoulder blade ends and partially where the cartilage is here. Horses have, like human, this is a cartilage. And my ear, that's cartilage. We don't want to damage this. Okay. So the pen now lays on the horse. And I want to see if the pen and on the horse and the pen on the saddle are parallel. It looks like this. This is an easy check everybody can do. Okay. So if I have a pencil, I can do it. If I have a pen, I can do it. I just have to find the picture so people can see what I'm talking. I find sometimes pictures say more than 1,000 words. Sometimes it takes a little longer. Okay. Bear with me. So what I like, we can measure today horses with our telephones, which is more accurate than anything out there. And it can be measurements, it's with a 3D. Oh, where's that picture? I'm looking too fast. That's why I'm overseeing it. Okay, now I'm taking my time. Does it make sense so far, Anna? Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, absolutely. Actually, so far, very understandable, in my opinion.
Okay. Wow. Okay, so here.
Actually, I think if I could ride in a proper saddles from the very beginning, I guess that could shorten up my way in improving my riding, to be honest.
Not just for you, but for the horse. So you see how these two pen are parallel?
Could you move it a little bit so it is? Yes, I see. Super, perfect.
Okay, so they're both are parallel. So that means that saddle fits the horse well. And when the horse moves, he won't trip. Okay. It fits proper through here. If it's this saddle or a metal or an English saddle, all the same to the horse. Okay. So it
Yeah,
fits.
it means just parallel lines means it's the same angle and the proper width. Basically, if there is a space, I understood.
So see, it's easy for you to follow because you're working with the hoof all the time. Right?
And
That's all what you do. You're always looking at angle, right? And the horse
yes,
width. So you get it. But most people never heard about that the tree comes in width and angles. So that's why it's so hard to teach. And I'm so grateful that you took your time and talked to us, because I can give you lots of opinions. But as I told you before, my dad was a physics and math teacher, and he always says the person knows the how will always follow the person knows the why. I wanted
my
to build.
initial also education, it was nuclear physics, so I'm quite.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah.
We got something in common.
Yes.
So from that moment on, Anna, I love if we can reconnect and I can show you more tricks. For example, how do I know my saddle is a female saddle or not? I go show you one more trick, okay? But there is 5 and we don't have the time. So if I want to see if I have the right saddle, all I need to do, pick up the saddle, put my hand on the middle of the pommel, but start my pinky with this front edge of the saddle. Wherever your thumb is, there's a seam distance, okay?
Yes.
That distance for a guy will never be more than 1 finger or 2 finger wide. See? That's how we make the peak. That's how we create that cutting effect in the crotch so our parts go left or right. No woman will ever ride on the saddle. Or she leans back because it hurts. No
Exactly.
guys rides on this saddle. Same test. Pinky here, put your hand. Look where the seam is. Look how wide that is. This is a very flat spot. There is a very soft spot here. No woman will ever hit here. A guy would say, this is the worst saddle because I'm going to fall on my parts because there's nothing that pushes them left or right. So there's many more tricks I can show people, how to check if the saddle fits them and fits the horse. And last not least, when people say, okay, I've been through the entire island of Cyprus, there is nothing here what I can do. We have specialized, this is why it's called Saddle for Women. We have specialized in fitting 95% of all riders, which are female. And we have specialized in saddles, what can be fit long distance. So how does that work? On your phone, you have Face ID. You can take the picture of the horse's back, and that can be emailed to us, and we rebuild the back. But I don't care how your horse's back looks standing. We want to see the horse walk, trot, canter, free, in a circle on the lunge line. I want to see how the horse's back moves. Some horse moves like this. Other moves a lot. I'm a massive, big believer that the rider and the horse have to be one unit, one soul. And that cannot happen if the energy from the rider and the energy of the horse melt into one. And the interface, the saddle, has to make that connection. But not when you sit in something what has purposely a peak in the crotch, purposely make your horse go out, or doesn't even fit your skeletal, right? So this is why your topic was so good. To fit the rider, I hate to say that to you, it's much easier. Why? Because you talk. Horses don't talk.
It's true, yes. It's true.
They do talk, but they talk different. So people who specialize in making saddles for the correct fit of the riders, they just need to measure the hip circumference, the thigh circumference, the upper leg, lower leg, and then the distance from hip to foot. And on that measurements, you know what saddle you want. used, new, adjustable, non-adjustable, of course adjustable, because what you're going to do when you want to have that horse retire and now want to have another horse, you want to take that saddle with you, right? So anyway, I'm so sorry I talk a lot. I had actually a couple of questions for you, but we're running out. And you can see that I'm very passionate about this. So maybe, I don't know how you feel about it, we can do it again. And
yes, thank you very much. It was very interesting, but I have also some thoughts, also some things to ask. So it would be good also to continue. Thank you. But it makes a lot of sense. Yes, so basically that feeling that something is off here, that was correct, because it was like I felt it's not possible to do it. And yes, it was just not possible to do it. It explains a lot.
Yeah, it's frustrating, but it's also exciting, because just like when you buy nice shoes for you, you look at the price, you look at the style, and when you put your foot in, this is, wow, this is really nice. This is how you will feel when you fit in the saddle. It says, are you joking me? It doesn't hurt my hip. It doesn't hurt my pelvis. I feel my seat bones, and I actually can put my leg underneath me without cramping up in the hip.
Yeah.
It does exist. So we just have to fit it.
The good thing, we have actually a representative of Saddlefit for Life in Cyprus.
Super.
I just got to know her, so we'll see. Yes, but yeah.
Good. So you can definitely help you.
Yes.
And it was so nice to meet you.
Thank you very much. Thank you for your time.
And reach out if we want to continue our conversation.
All right. Thank you very much. Definitely we keep in touch.
All right. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Have a good day. Goodbye.